to another controversy, which is Matt Hancock, of course. Did he follow the science? And there's ramifications to this, because we were all kept under lock and key, weren't we? Because it was following the science. But if the bloke himself wasn't following the science, he was telling us to do it, how does that make you feel? Joining me now is care home owner, it's Nicola Richards. Nicola, thank you very much. OK, right, so when it comes to the care home, the ring of steel, OK, did that ever exist?
Never existed. The protective ring that Matt promised never existed. We know from providers across the country that just didn't happen. And it doesn't come as a surprise as to what we've seen today, as to what's been leaked out there. The testing wasn't there. It wasn't available. We were lambs to the slaughter, ultimately, in social care several years ago. And it's quite emotional for us to talk about this today, because we've been on the front line, we've been fighting this. Matt Hancock literally has lied. He's lied.
Now, he obviously says, OK, well, things remain to be proven, these things have been doctored, etc. That's Hancock's view. He's pretty staunchly defending that. I get what you're saying, right? But Matt Hancock obviously gives the other side of that. And time will tell. When it comes to the actual testing, now, just forgive me on this. I'm hoping you might be able to actually educate me a bit on this, because what they were saying was that everyone who was coming out of hospital wards into care homes was tested. That's not really what's up for discussion in the latest WhatsApp messages. What's in the WhatsApp messages is that other people going into care homes, presumably care workers or whoever had to come in and out of care homes, they weren't being given tests. Were even people coming out of hospital wards into care homes being tested? Because if they weren't, then would it have actually made a difference if we tested the other people? Do you get what I mean?
It did vary from region to region, but ultimately there was a lack of testing that was available for staff, for residents coming through into care homes. The guidance changed so often. From March to April, we were often informed by media on guidance changes. Providers couldn't keep up with the guidance. They just couldn't do it. The testing, there was no testing. There was a lack of testing facilities. So when we heard about we're testing so many thousands a day, it didn't happen. It's quite simple. It didn't happen. And so we got the guidance that care homes were not going to be affected back in March, I think, or February. Of course they were going to be affected. It did impact. We cannot ignore the number of people who have lost loved ones throughout this pandemic. As you alluded to earlier, 40,000+ people. We lost 30 residents of our loved ones in our care when we should have been protected. That protective ring never existed. Matt Hancock basically lied. He did lie.
OK. Obviously, Matt Hancock does refute all of that, and we will have to wait and see. When it comes to the actual testing, if they had the testing that a lot of people feel they were promised, would it actually have made that much of a difference? Because COVID was just ripping through care homes anyway. Would it have just been a token gesture?
It would have assisted. It would have helped us to cohort units, wards, floors within a care home. It would have assisted us. We would have known what we were dealing with. To not test and to discharge, quite frankly, caused us a massive, massive overloading pressure that caused loss of lives. We couldn't cope. We'd not got the testing available. Everything was diverted to the NHS. We know that. We can't ignore that. They quite frankly deny that, but that is what happened.
Nicola, we
as providers on the front line knew that was happening, and that absolutely categorically happened. If we'd have had testing, that would have helped, but it wasn't just the testing, it was all about the PPE as well. There was a lack of PPE. Supplies were diverted to the NHS again. So it's not just about the testing, it was about the staff movement, the PPE and everything else. But yeah, absolutely, it would have helped us.
In light of the fact that all of that wasn't happening, right? So COVID was in care homes, people coming in and out of care homes, people coming in and out of the NHS. I mean, it was rife, OK? In light of the fact that that was known to be the case, with hindsight, do you think we should have just let relatives be with their loved ones or not? Because it doesn't appear to have made any difference whatsoever that they had to stand behind a sheet of glass and not actually hold the hand of someone who maybe only had weeks to live?
You're asking me a question when Matt Hancock was flaunting the rules on his own social background, yet relatives who'd got people dying in care homes were not visiting. I mean, come on, it's not rocket science. We should have had some more guidance. We should have had some more assistance. We should have been able to risk assess in our own services and let families in through the doors when we couldn't do. And there was all the insurance pressures and everything else that we've all been raising for the last couple of years. Yet Matt Hancock was quite clearly flaunting the rules on that. I mean, it makes my blood boil when I know what my families, my staff and residents have been through on the last few years. The journey we've been through has been horrendous. I can't tell you, I can't describe it. But when Matt Hancock is sat there saying what he does and goes on celebrity TV, he's the biggest snake in that camp. That's all I'll say. OK. Nicola,
thank you very, very much, and good luck to you. Nicola Richards there, who is a care home owner, clearly very passionate, strong views, understandably so, about the latest from Matt Hancock. The spokesperson for Matt Hancock says, in part, these stolen messages have been doctored to create a false story that Matt rejected clinical advice on care home testing. That is flat wrong. On April the 14th, Matt received a response to his request for advice from the Chief Medical Officer that testing was needed for people going into care homes, which he enthusiastically accepted. Later that day, he convened an operational meeting on delivering testing for care homes, where he was advised it was not currently possible to test everyone entering care homes, which he also accepted. Matt concluded that the testing of people leaving hospital for care homes should be prioritised because of the higher risks of transmission, as it wasn't possible to mandate everyone going into care homes got tested. Right, OK, so there we go. Now, we're moving away, I think we'll all be pleased to know, from the latest Matt Hancock allegations and indeed COVID.